Today we're going to take a look at every single trap in chess, starting with the Noah's Ark trap, starting with e4, e5, knight f3, and we go into a Spanish line. a6, bishop a4, and d6. d6 is quite an uncommon move, but you can still play it. And d4. This is a move I wouldn't recommend in this position. Usually you should play something like c3. But b4, not the best move. And now b5, bishop b3. And now if black takes, you shouldn't take on d4 back. Just accept that you lost a pawn, but queen to d4 is quite a bad move because of c5, queen to d5. And now you might say, okay, I got this, I got the f7, I got a8. So I'm either checkmating you as black or I'm going to win your rook, but you're wrong. Black can simply play the move bishop e6 and attack the queen and also protect the rook on a8. And now queen c6, bishop d7, and the queen could go back. But now the difference is that the queen is protecting the rook on a8, and therefore black can simply play c4 and prevent white from checkmating black, but also winning the piece on b3, and now the position is simply lost. So there is no escape for white anymore. So what should have been played better? Well, first, don't play the move d4. It's a bad move. Something like castling or c3 is a better one. And if you played d4 and made this mistake, in this position, don't take the pawn with your queen. It's poisonous. Play something like a4 and try to rescue your position. The next trap is the legal trap. We start again with e4, e5, knight f3, and the pawn to d6. And now we have the fiddle position, and white plays the move bishop c4. Black plays knight to c6, and we already see that move d7 to d6 is not a good one because the bishop on f8 is behind the pawn, so usually it should be on c5 in front of the pawn range, but behind it it's quite locked. Therefore d6 wasn't the best idea. Knight to c3, and bishop g4 is again not a brilliant move because there's no sense of developing your queen side. Instead, you should play something like bishop e7 and focus on your king side and on developing all your pieces so that you can castle in next to no time. But instead, bishop g4, h3, and now black basically has to take on f3 and exchange his bishop against the knight and play something like knight to f6, and the position is not great but still playable. But in the legal trap, black as usually plays something like bishop h5, and now there is actually a problem because knight takes e5 works, sacrificing your queen, but on the other side this is not possible because of bishop takes f7. The king of black has to go to e7, and knight e5 is actually checkmate. The knight on e5 protects d7, the bishop on f7 protects e8 and e6 as well, and the knight on d5 protects f6, and of course the king itself is in a check position. So in this position after knight e5, black cannot leave this f7 square and therefore has to play something like knight to e5 maybe. But now you would say, well, after queen h5 I have knight to c4. Why is white even better? Well, it's because of the move queen to b5, and now the white queen attacks both the king on e8 as well as the knight on c4, and therefore is going to win the piece back and is now up a full pawn. So this would be a better idea for black, but still this position is quite good for white and should be winning also quite soon. So actually, what could we better do as black to prevent all of this? After h3, if we played in this way, we have to take on f3 and be happy with this kind of position. The next one is the Lasker trap. And this time we start with the pawn move d4, d5, c4, and e5. That's an interesting one. The usual move is to take on e5, but after d4, white has to be careful. If not, the Lasker trap happens. For example, something like e3, not the best idea. Because of bishop b4, bishop d2, and now it takes e3. And if white thinks, well, I could just simply take on b4, it's a free piece, then, well, you're quite wrong, because then black can take on f2, attacking both the king on e1 as well as the knight on g1. Well, if the white king takes on f2, black is going to take the queen on d1, and this position is simply winning for black, so this is no option. White has to defend his queen with his king on e2. Well, afterwards, black is going to play takes g1 and under-promote his pawn into a knight, giving another check. And if the rook takes on g1, of course, bishop g4, and we make a pin, and the queen on d1 will be lost anyway. So the logical idea is that we go out of this threat from black and go with king to e1. Well, then queen h4, and we lack any good ideas, something like g3, then knight e4, and we are going to lose our rook on h1, also not a very pleasant idea. So king d2 maybe is the only option, but this position is also quite lost. We don't lose immediately, but black will develop quite fast, something like bishop to g4, and then has the opportunity of castling longside, and now the queen will be lost also, and white is going to be checkmated quite quickly. So what could white have done better? Well, in this position, instead of playing something like e3, which is not a great idea, white should play something like knight to f3, and then after bishop b4, you can simply play something like knight to d2 and something a3, b4 in the next moves, and just have a pawn more on your field. It's just a recommendation by myself. And after Lasker follows Rubinstein, and he invented a quite interesting trap also in the Queen's Gambit, kind of casual position. And this line is also called the Rubinstein variation for black. a6 has the idea of taking on c4 and afterwards playing the move b5 and attacking the bishop on c4, and therefore afterwards developing your bishop from c8 to b7 and get new squares. So white tries to prevent that with taking on d5 by himself and bishop to d3. Well, c6 is now the move, and after castling, knight to e4. Well, a usual move would be something like bishop takes e7, queen to e7, and maybe something like knight to d2. But in the line we're looking at, white plays bishop f4, and he has a quite interesting idea to play. Now there are two moves that black can play, either f5 or knight to f6. Well, one of them is okay, the other one is quite bad. The correct move is knight to f6. That's quite a normal move, casual move, and this position is okay, kind of drawish. But after f5, maybe a move that you want to do if you want to attack on the king side with g5 maybe, then white has a very interesting idea, which is knight takes d5, and if black takes on d5, bishop c7. and your queen is trapped on d8, and there's nothing you can do about it. So after knight to d5, black shouldn't take on d5 back, but in this position he has lost a central pawn. In this position should be very good for white. So if you ever have a position like this with a knight on c3 and a bishop on f4, be careful about such an idea as knight to d5 followed by bishop c7, and therefore you should almost always play a move like knight to f6. Trap number 5 is the Siberian trap. e4, c5, d4, and we go into the Mora gambit. Well, knight to c6, knight f3, e6, and maybe if you are familiar with the chess world, you have seen this trap already in a game between Bill Gates and Magnus Carlsen. They played it in an exhibition match, and the line starts with knight g4. Well, this is usually not the best idea because it's not threatening something, but it's preparing a trick for black. Well, right now, the pawn on h2 is still defended by the knight on f3. But h3 is not a good idea, although it seems like a natural move, attacking the piece on g4. But afterwards, knight to d4, and now white has an option. He can take knight on d4, but then will be checkmated. Well, if he doesn't take, black is going to take on f3 and checkmate as well. So knight d4, queen h2 checkmate. If queen to d1, then takes on f3 and also checkmate on h2. And well, the last idea would be something like takes on g4 and then sacrificing the queen so that you're two pieces against a queen, but still this is nothing that we should play as white. And black is of course winning here, having a very strong queen against poor knight and bishop. So what should white do instead of playing something like h3? Well, in this position, it's knight to b5, and after something like queen to b8, probably now h3, because the square d4 is defended by both knight on b5 as well as knight on f3, and therefore knight d4 is not possible in this position because of knight takes d4, but with the knight on b5. So knight to b5 is an idea for white to prevent black from doing this. Trap number 6 is the Feyerowitz trap, and it starts with d4, knight to f6, c4 and e5, and we have the Budapest gambit. Well, the most logical move is to take, and now something like knight to e4, and if knight f3, d6, and the move takes d6 with the bishop. And now g3 is very bad move, although it seems logical to develop your bishop from f1 to g2, but in this position black can take on f2, having a fork on the queen on d1 as well as the rook on h1. If white doesn't want to lose any material, he has to take on f2, but after that bishop takes g3, attacking the queen on d1 as well as giving check on the king on f2, and after taking on g3, black is going to win the queen on d1. So this is again winning for black. So what should white do? Well, of course not playing something like g3. A better idea would be something like knight to d2, attacking the knight on e4, and after something like knight takes d2, we can take with our bishop, or after something like knight to f6, we can play something like b3, develop our bishop, and then something like g3 or e3. Now let's talk about the Blackburn shilling trap. It's about e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, Italian game, but now the move knight to d4, offering to trade or offering to sacrifice the pawn on e5. Usually, I would recommend you to play it something like c3 and play it cool and don't risk it all. Just play a casual game. You can even play something like d4 in this position. This would be all fine. If white is quite greedy, he can take on e5 and then the misery begins. Of course, queen to g5, and as a white amateur you might think, oh, black is quite a patzer, he has not seen that he is running into a fork, but this is also in black's plan, because queen to g2, now attacking the rook on h1, so rook f1 is the best idea, queen e4, and now if bishop e2, knight to f3 is going to be checkmate. So if you have this position, you have to sacrifice your queen, and this position is all over. And after the move queen to g5, there's actually not a lot you can do against it. Maybe something like knight to g4, but d5 is also possible, so don't play knight to e5 after the move knight to d4. Nobody with black is so stupid just to hang their pawn immediately in the opening. There is some trick behind it. And how can we prevent the Blackburn shilling trap? It's with c3 or knight c3 or castling. Just don't take on e5. c3, again, my recommendation. Takes f3, queen f3, knight to f6, and just have a chill game and don't think too much. Trap number 9, the England Gambit. Starting with the England Gambit, what so surprise? Taking on e5, and this trap is also quite famous, has been played by many players, including Gotham Chess, f3, knight to e7, and if white really wants to defend his pawn at all costs, this is going to be a very bad ending. Queen to b4, attacking the bishop on f4 as well as the king on e1. And now something like bishop d2, queen to b2, attacking the rook on a1, bishop c3, and now the brilliant move bishop b4. And now the white bishop cannot take the black queen. He is quite unmovable. Queen to d2, now being able to attack queen on b2, black has to act, and this is with bishop takes c3, and after queen takes c3, queen c1 is going to be checkmate. So in this position, white has to play something like knight takes c3 and loses the rook on a1. So how to end this big misery? Well, it's in this position, you simply shouldn't play bishop f4. It's not the best idea. Maybe something like knight to c3, knight to e5, and something like knight to d5. But don't just panic and play all greedy moves that help you to secure your pawn at all costs, because a pawn is just a simple sacrifice compared to a rook. And last but not least, for today, I've brought you the fishing pole trap, but if you have watched till this moment in the video, please like and subscribe. It will help me a lot. And starting with the fishing pole trap, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And we again have Spanish position, but again such a move like knight to g4. Be always aware of these little tricks. They're naughty, but they don't help black if you play correctly. But of course, if you fall into his trap, it's going to be quite bad. h3, f h5. And now, should we take on g4 or shouldn't we? That's the big question. Well, if we do, it's not going to be very good for us. Takes, and now the h file is open. And that's going to be a huge issue. If we go back with our knight, then the queen can simply go to h4, and now checkmate is not preventable anymore. We cannot avoid it. f3 to get a square for our king, but g3, closing up the square, and now queen to h2 is going to be made the next move. So in this position, you should play something like g3 to prevent the black queen from entering the h file. But if we lose our piece back on f3, well, then we should not take it in first place. And h5 is just a weakness, and knight to g4 as well. And we can simply play something like c3, d4, just play as if nothing happened and ignore these antics from black. They're just stupid, and you should not be greedy and take everything that your opponent serves you in the first place. That's something that I want to give you with this whole lecture. Remember, not every sacrifice is good for our opponent, but if something looks very stupid, then looks twice in order to prevent any traps. Let's see you next time. Bye bye.